Now, Isabel, I know that you have children. You were listening to our conversation about charters. There's also a big.
Well, I don't know if you've been talking about it today because I was on the subway, but did you hear about this school in Brooklyn?
I did hear there was a big protest about the testing, but
That's right. Because I don't know about your kid. My kid did some major testing this week, and
my kid did too.
But it's fine if it's just a week. But the fact is that he has been studying for the test, prepping for the test for, I want to say, 4 months.
And your kid's in 4th grade.
Yes.
All right, my kid's in 3rd grade. They still get the test too. It doesn't have the same implications. But next week or after vacation, they're going to do another 3 days of math. I today went to it was like they have like parents can go in on certain days sometimes to visit the classroom. I went in. The teacher had the parents in there before the kids. The kids were in the hall. The teacher almost literally her voice was cracking as she was talking about. She said, "Look, the kids did okay. They try and mitigate the whole process for them by they give them like gummy bears and this and that. But my kid's 8 years old. She had to take a 80-minute long test, 3 days in a row.
3 days in a row that they are like cramming and jamming it in there, and this is the test, and it's important, and and in 4th grade they're like, and this, by the way, is going to determine your future.
Yes.
And mine.
And they make that clear to the kids.
Oh yeah.
How do you hide?
I mean,
that
how
from
could you hide it just with the reality of the length
and the
of time?
reality is that's the reality. And so you have teachers who are forced to teach to it. And then apparently the big scandal with this is that we are not allowed to know what the test is.
But here's the thing. Okay. So your kid goes to public school and that's part of the deal, and you think, okay, there's upsides and downsides, but I'll choose to look at the upsides. Like, not everything in life is fun. Sometimes you have to take standardized tests, LSATs, blah, 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 SATs. So you think, all right, well, at least they're learning some kind of skill in some way, and I'm just not going to just get that angry about it, even though you kind of can. But you hope that the test will be filled with a correct assessment of their reading comprehension and interesting things to read and appropriate things. But this school, and I'm going to read the letter because I got it yesterday from a certain person that I... Okay.
Oh,
okay.
Isabel Gillies has... She has
I have a little
Isabel Gillies with the intercept over here.
Oh, I don't know how to use technology. I only know how to break into people's email boxes with my phone using a Tor client so that I can't be traced.
Gillies.
She's orchestrating
I'm
a
going
parent-teacher
deep.
council WikiLeaks, and she can't download an app.
That's right. I'm like cracking down into the deep
I can't
internet.
possibly download an app, but when it comes to hijacking someone's email box.
Okay.
All right, read the.
This is from the administration. This is from the principal of a public school in Brooklyn. Okay. So it says, our 3rd, 4th, 5th grade have just completed the 3 days of the New York State English Language Arts test. Your children were wonderful, incredibly, they worked hard on the whole, blah, 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 blah. Okay. However, the teachers and administration are truly devastated by what a terrible test it was and how little it will tell us about our students. Because we are bound by test security, we cannot reveal details, but we can tell you that we have never seen an ELA exam that does a worse job of testing reading comprehension. There was inappropriate content, many highly ambiguous questions, and a focus on structure rather than meaning of passages. Our teachers and administrators feel that this test is an insult to the profession of teaching and that students' scores on it will not correlate with their reading ability. Because of this, the staff has decided to hold a protest out school of blah, 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 and then they had a protest. I think that's pretty big stuff.
And here's the thing. The teacher says to us today, we come in there because all schools in New York,
everyone,
get this test.
Every public school.
Yes. Her voice was cracking when she was talking about just sort of the idea of these kids being subjected to this type of testing regime. And longtime teacher, great teacher. And she said, I cannot tell you anything that was on the test. I cannot tell you, there's nothing else I can say about it. She's like, because of They are bound by test security. And I asked why, and it's basically because the outfit that does it is Pearson, right? Some company that puts these tests out, I think it is. They want to either use these tests again in the future, and don't want them floating around, which in and of itself is also absurd. Like, you get to do this as a one-off for you guys. You get residuals on this test. It's absurd.
Well, and it's millions and millions and millions of dollars that go behind it, right? It's all connected to all sorts of things. And then, but they can't even get it right.
And we know the past tests have been absolutely absurd
and inaccurate.
This is all just part of. There's just a lot of big money here, and
whose fault is this? Is it Bloomberg?
Well, I think frankly, you could Bloomberg, Cuomo, Arnie Duncan, President Obama. It goes on and on. President Bush,
Bill
right?
Gates,
No
child left behind.
There's
because
waiting for Superman. There's this whole push to privatize that has multiple, and this is what we talked about actually on the program yesterday, in part with Henry Giroux yesterday. Was there's a multitude of forces that are acting upon this. One is just sheer profitability. Private tests, private companies. There's also ways of underwriting charter schools and using it as a way of buying properties, and it enriches the people who work there, and they come from certain areas. They have a lot of money. And then part of it is also sort of somebody has come from a corporate culture. They impose this on the rest of society. And there's also other benefits that sort of, he talked about how these are disimagination factories where the kids, it is a process in which they are detached from the learning process, and these things measure what they are forced to measure are skill sets that are very much depoliticized, and it changes the tenor of the education the kids are getting.
Well, right, and I'll tell you something. Your little 9-year-old, so Thomas, I'm looking at his brain.
He's not mine.
9.
He's yours.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You said your little 9-year-old.
No.
No.
My, but I'm looking at his brain and his ability and what he can do, and I say, hey, folks, how about great expectations? How about, why are you wasting this child and all the children? They're all smart and great. All their brain power and concentration and ability to manage stress with this crap. It makes me so angry that he's basically wasted a year of his life, because especially after I read that letter, the administration and teachers think it's all hooey.
And just so people understand, particularly in New York, in particular, this test that you take in fourth grade, it determines what middle school you get into, which determines which high school you get into. Yeah. It's
a big deal, and you can get 1, 2, 3, or 4. And
what's the highest?
4. And
that's what Milo's going to get, incidentally.
Well, by the way, so if your kid is
my kid's better than all other kids,
or has a learning disability or whatever, you're not going to do well, because it's, there are tricks. It's the other thing is that mostly what Thomas did was the teacher gave him a whole bunch of tricks to memorize. Like, you get points if you don't just say, in this essay about polar bears declining in the, Arctic regions, blah, blah, blah. If you put the title of the piece. So if you say, in this essay, polar bears are going down, you get points. So that's just a trick, right? That's just like, then you just.
Hem's writing it down.
No, but I think.
Why wouldn't I? That's the problem with this whole process. In fact, we got to talk later, because I want the whole list of these tricks.
But don't you think that?
And then I'll send my kid to a tutor to learn these tricks, and then I'll send her
for $150 an
Then
hour.
I'm going to send her to ELA camp this summer.
Arguably, just really briefly though, linking back to what you said, Isabel, and in conjunction with what Professor Giroux was saying yesterday. Certainly from his perspective, like, that's the point. Why would we want your kid reading Great Expectations or Dickens or whatever? when they can be trained to take a test properly, and if they do it well, make potentially a good worker, or if not, forget it. Like, that's the point. And learning the tricks is part of the point too. Anybody I've talked to who's around the testing industry, they're like, that is the point. It's not knowing
That's
the
what
content.
Thomas said
You're
yesterday.
measuring
how
what are your
person
tactics.
takes the test.
What are your tactics?
Right.
How do you approach? That's the whole thing.
That's right. And
That's
Thomas said, I said, well, what, how did you determine your answers, right? And he was like, well, what you do is you just get the best possible answer to the question, although there's going to be 2 or 3 that also make sense. And I was like, that's sort of sick that you can't write an essay and say, well, there's this, and you can see that from this point of view, but then on the other hand, there's this. It's like no comparative ability. It's just like, because there's going to be little tricks and little ways to screw you up. And but I was quite proud of him for being so mindful of the tricks in some ways, because he was like, I got this down.
Yeah, I mean, but it's sad because it is sad. I have learned how to sort of, it promotes the idea, and that school that Thomas goes to, they did very well in those tests last year, right? I mean,
they did sort of, and everybody else, lots and lots of schools did terribly because they made it so much harder.
Yes.
It's just, I guess maybe it's boring to people who aren't involved with it, but actually it's not. It shouldn't be, because it's part of it. Has to be seen.
It has to be seen in a just a larger movement to privatize all sorts of things, and it's definitely part of the larger influence that the plutocracy has on our government. I mean, and our society at large. That's the whole point.
I think that's true, but I think it potentially has even deeper roots. I mean, there was this book in the 70s called Deschooling Society, and the point was, and this is just in the industrial era where there wasn't all this debates about privatization, but the point was that school is not designed to produce learning, or until it's designed to produce workers, essentially. And even
then how come we're so bad in that area?
Right. But even in that context, school is not, the language of what school is supposed to do and what its actual function is are not lined up. And that has very long roots.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely there's some validity to that. But I think a good school, and which provides sort of like broad opportunities, and is not about conforming. I mean, that's one of the things. There was one of those charters, one of those success academies, moving in to the Upper West Side, right, when we were up there, and they're taking over space at one of the public schools up there. That's a district that has some great public schools already, and they're, I think for a lot of students, it offers some opportunities depending on the neighborhood, what their neighborhood school is about. But it also is very much about sort of like, teaching a lot of these kids to conform to in a corporate sort of process. And some of these schools, you get good outcomes. Some of them, you don't get good outcomes, just like public schools.
Right.
The only difference is that there's far more oversight over the public schools than there is in these private schools. And
it is so frustrating being on a PA and hearing the administration say over and over again, the DOE, we can't do that because the DOE, we can't do that. I mean, it's like the DOE has an iron grip on all of the learning, all of the funds, all of the, I mean, if they're going to take away your art teacher or your art room, I mean,